back to Insight with Praveen Puram, with all the informational live shows with great people in the community. Today, we have esteemed guests from the Startup Incubator. Our topic would be Disrupting Global Startup Incubators. We have Ali Merritt from Atlanta Tech Village and Mr. Srinivas Rao, called as MSR. He is the CEO of T-Hub. So most of you might have known that is the heart in the Hyderabad. And coming to the show, this show is all about bringing awareness on great topics, which are very, very friendly to the NRIs. Any information, knowledge, achievement can be shared on this show. So just let's get started. I will formally welcome Ali Merritt and MSR to the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So let me introduce Ali Merritt and MSR in a short bio, and then I will let them to introduce if I have missed any. So Ali Merritt is the managing director of Atlanta Tech Village and formerly head of community at SalesLoft, where she had been everything from product management to CX to chief of staff. Ali has spent last decade focused on diversity and inclusion in the Atlanta startup community. She has previously organized Atlanta Startup Village and sporadically blogs about tech and startups at AliIntheATL.com. That's a fantastic profile, Ali, and great to know about you and your work in the startup era. And similarly, I would like to introduce MSR. So MSR is the CEO of T-Hub. As you all know, T-Hub is in Hyderabad, Telangana, and MSR is the CEO, which enables and empowers an ecosystem hungry for innovation. An accomplished serial entrepreneur, MSR has built and scaled businesses across geographies over his 33-year stint in the IT industry. He's a native of Telangana, and he holds an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, and a bachelor degree in engineering college in OU College of Engineering. With that said, we will discuss more about their achievements and how the startups have been growing. So I will let Ali to introduce more if I have missed any about you, what you want to say to the viewers of Mana TV and TV5.
I don't know that you missed anything. I think that it's always interesting when you have to condense your career into a couple of sentences, and what you want people to know about you. The only other thing that I might mention is Atlanta Tech Village is the fourth largest innovation hub in the US, specifically focused on tech. And so I think in a lot of ways, T-Hub and Atlanta Tech Village have a lot in common with our goals and what we're trying to do for entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Ali. MSR, please let the viewers know more about T-Hub and what are your achievements.
Sure. So I think T-Hub is about 6.5 years old. So obviously, I think for many of the viewers, they will know that Telangana as a state was formed in 2014. It became the 29th state of the union, and the leadership wanted to do something to place entrepreneurship and innovation, at the forefront of everything we do. And so, to put that into motion, T-Hub was set up. T-Hub is a public-private partnership with the government of Telangana, the International Institute of Information Technology, the Indian School of Business, and NALSAR. Three academic institutions and the government coming together to set up this entity. And in the last 6.5 years, we started off originally as a co-working space, but obviously we moved on to incubation, acceleration. We also do a lot of work in the corporate innovation space, helping corporates with their open innovation, helping them with integrating with the open innovation ecosystem. Happy to say that in the last 6.5 years, we've had about 1,100 plus companies we worked with and help them. So I guess the first thing is help them survive, right? One, and second is go on to build. Many of them have gone on to build scaled businesses, have raised close to $4 billion of capital, and have created a large number of jobs in Hyderabad. So yeah, that's a
Excellent.
quick snapshot of what we do.
Great, MSR. Great to know about the achievements. And just wanted to again set the stage. This is exclusively how to connect, how to bridge between international hubs, right? So, for example, T Hub is in Andhra Pradesh, in Telangana, and also it is in India. And this is the Atlanta Tech Village is in Atlanta. So, our aim is basically how to bridge the gap and what type of synergies can be done between the hubs together, right? And second thing, most of the buzzwords, if you hear, entrepreneurship, startups, incubators, right? So how do anyone, if you see today's youth, even I see most of the youth are also inventing, innovating, and coming up with ideas. So how do we, how does the youth can come to these incubators? What is the medium they can reach out to us, and how you guys can help them? So that's the first question we will start, because that is a basic question. If anyone have an idea what they have to do and how they have to connect. So please, anyone can go ahead, how, what, and how, why they have to come to you.
So we do have our initial focus for Atlanta Tech Village is primarily Atlanta, and then by extension, the Southeast. We are trying to create opportunity in the South, specifically because it is frequently an underrepresented area of the country, and try to reach out to people who aren't in Silicon Valley and can't afford to live in San Francisco, for example. So we do a lot actually with our local communities, both with the universities and their entrepreneur hubs in the local area, as well as hosting high school students, middle school students. We actually hosted a high school pitch competition the other day. And we send our founders and our investors who are affiliated with the village, as well as our mentors and advisors, into the community to try and make sure that we are providing resources and creating that connectivity. Because so much, especially in the United States, around being able to fundraise for your startup and know where to go and find those resources is around who you know. And a lot of youths don't start with that level of connection. So we're trying to help build that connectivity to begin with. Anybody can reach out and have a tour here. We also host a lot of events, which are currently still, there's a piece of them that are virtual, so they are accessible internationally as well. Although depending on time zone, maybe not as accessible in India, since we have quite a bit of a gap, unfortunately.
Absolutely, absolutely, Ali. MSR, you want to add anything around this?
Sure. So I think so. To the two or three different ways, we try and build. Any young person with an idea can potentially engage with us. So currently, similar to what I think Ali said, we do have a large college outreach program. We actually run a program. We call it Instilling the Entrepreneurial Mindset. We call it EMC. So we're currently working with about 35 colleges across Telangana. So essentially, the intent there is to basically sensitize young people about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship as a viable career choice. Not everyone needs to go out looking for a job, but potentially, we can figure out how to build and obviously educate them about the pros and cons of entrepreneurship and all of that. That's one part. And then, so what we do is at the end of these engagements, we typically identify typically in each college, we identify about 50 young people who seem to exhibit an entrepreneurial mindset, right? And then we run a kind of hackathon where they can come up with ideas, flesh it out, pitch in front of a jury, and so on. And so essentially, it gives them, and usually there are some small grants available, so that in case some of these ideas are potentially convertible to a business, they get the opportunity to do that. So that's one part of it. Now, for people outside of the college system, so suppose there's somebody who's already, for example, working somewhere and has got an idea about which, most entrepreneurs start with a vision that they want to change the world, right? So, so basically, so we have programs. So essentially, The programs, the first program I talked about is a program called, we call it Launchpad, which we work with colleges. And then the kind of this, we think about entrepreneurship as a kind of feeder, right? So you have different blocks at different points in time. So if you've got an interesting idea, then we run a program, we call it Masterclass. The whole intent is to kind of help you suss out the idea, make sure that, many times, many entrepreneurs you'll find take too long to understand whether whatever they're building is something which is sometimes maybe just a Me Too idea. The problem has been solved elsewhere, or it's something which is going to be really hard to scale, right? Or also some cases it's really hard to make money, right? As an example, right? And then after struggling for a couple of years, they sometimes run out of money, or run out of patience, and then decide to give it up all. So the intent of that program is to basically figure out how we can reduce the time for the young person with the idea to figure out whether it's something which they really seriously want to pursue, building a business around it, right? It's again across both for profit as well as not for profit, right? So you could be a social impact entrepreneur, for example, right? You want to solve for problem around waste management or water management, or or clean energy or whatever. But end of the day, you have to figure out how to convert the idea into something where you can actually build a sustainability around the entity, right? So that's what we really do. So and people can come in through the website. We also, of course, do outreach programs, which I imagine would not be dissimilar to what Ali is doing. Yeah. So we all kind of sing of the same hymn sheet, if you will. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you want to add something?
I would like to add something. I think, MSR, you touched on something I think that's important, is that many people have an idea that they want to change the world, but they don't necessarily understand how to make it financially feasible as a business. And that can be one of the hardest things, I think, for people to make that next step. And certainly there are ways to do that with a nonprofit, but it's much more advantageous if you can create a business model that works and self-sustains as well. We do a program called Startup Summer School every summer. So it's every Thursday for 8 weeks. And you start with Entrepreneurship 101, and then you slowly dig into things that are in more specific ways. So building your business case, for example. And we've actually got several teams of parent and teenager who are attending, which is wonderful, that the parents are supporting the teen who wants to learn how to do this. And some of them are actually creating companies together, which is even more wonderful to see these family companies happening. But to your point, providing the vision of here's a great idea, here's how you make it into a business. And that can be, I think, the hardest step for people.
Awesome, Ali and MSR. So very, very interesting point you have touched. If anyone has an idea, you can go on to T-Hub, or you can go on to Atlanta Tech Village and see if you can be part of the Launchpad or the Atlanta Summer Classes. So what do you think today's world, the young, even from a 7th grader as well, you see the entrepreneurs, right? So do you see our schooling system or the universities are equipped to, have a curriculum on entrepreneurship? Do you think are we ready?
So do you want me to go first?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, let's put it this way, right? So if you think about some of the skills which you require to be an entrepreneur, right? I think, we can talk about many of them, but broadly, I think, you can define it as, things around critical thinking, around collaboration, right? Around problem solving, right? Communication, and, being able to put a team together, and all of that stuff, right? So I think, to be fair, I think there's a lot to be done, on that front, right? It's fair to say that I think our colleges and schools particularly do not really equip children with these, what you might call 21st century skills, right? Because today, I think it's fair to say that technology changes rapidly. So you can learn a programming language, but we probably need to learn a new one in the next 5 years.
Maybe
Right?
less.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I think what's really important is, to focus on things which, since everything is so fast paced and everything's changing so rapidly, focus on some of these things, as I said, critical thinking, collaboration, community, and communication, and so on. So I'll pause here for Ali, uh, for Ali's reflections.
I agree entirely. I think that in a lot of ways, schools and the school system has a formal process that doesn't necessarily allow for teaching critical thinking. You teach a lot of memorization and regurgitation, which works for a school and a testing environment, but doesn't necessarily translate into, to your point, the critical thinking skills, the communication skills, the interpersonal skills that are really necessary for creating a new startup, becoming an entrepreneur. I will say that I've seen more colleges start creating programs specifically focused on entrepreneurship, startups. I don't think that maybe college is too late for that almost. I feel that maybe those sorts of programs are going to have a much bigger impact if you're starting in high school, you're starting in middle school, when a lot of children are still feeling very creative. They still have ideas. They haven't yet been taught to only think inside a very small box. And some of the schools in Atlanta, for example, that are working on a little bit of a less formal curriculum, do things like create entrepreneurship classes. The high school students that I mentioned that we hosted the pitch event for have a semester long entrepreneurship class, and they're juniors in high school. They are 15, 16 years old, and they are in an entire class where they are required to come up with a startup idea from start to finish and then pitch it at the end. And they actually get several $1,000s at the end to take that idea to the next level. And I think starting at that level or even earlier is critical to creating the next generation of entrepreneurs, because MSR, I completely agree, the critical thinking skills are sort of not as valued when you are just in a testing environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So another interesting question I wanted to ask, because most of whether it is NRIs or anywhere local guys, see, most of the entrepreneurs, if you see, they will be from the urban community, right? For example, there are certain ideas from the rural community as well, but they do not have the awareness. As MSR has pointed, few of the startups, they know what is the idea, but you need to know how we need to put it in place and move it forward. We can't wait years together, right? The world is changing every month. The new technology is coming, and that will be disrupted. So what is your recommendation or inputs to any of the entrepreneur? For example, your Launchpad program or the Atlanta semester programs. Do you give them mentorship? It's free, or they have to pay, or what is the cycle you follow?
So we do several things. Startup Summer School, for example, is I think it's 8 classes once a week. You can sign up for the individual classes. It's $10 a class. Intentionally, we keep it low, and that includes lunch. So we try to make sure that you're getting value for while you're there. And you can actually buy package for a little bit cheaper. So we're intentionally trying to keep it on a slightly cheaper level. If you are already a Village member, it's free to you. But we also offer a lot of free workshops that we do weekly that are free to anybody. And most of those have a virtual component as well. We advertise them, you sign up, you attend, and we have industry experts speaking on everything from personal branding to how to understand a cap table to, just thinking through how to build your business model. And we want to do that so that it is as accessible as possible at a very non-monetary level. We also do a lot of networking events to try and build that communication and that community that MSR mentioned, that are free, that are available. We provide food, we provide beverages, because we want to make them accessible. And we cross-promote those to the universities in town, as well as to the startup ecosystem as a whole. And I think an extension of that is also, you don't have to be based in Atlanta to go. So there are people who are living in surrounding areas that are a bit more rural, or not just even a city, but maybe a community that's an hour and a half away that may come into Atlanta for those events?
Yeah, so I think our approach here has been, we have an ecosystem in place, which has been built, partly obviously with government support. So we have two other, you might call them sister entities. So we have something called Telangana State Innovation Cell, TSIC, and this is the focus of this is largely tends to be on what we call tier 2 and tier 3 cities and towns, and focus on impact entrepreneurship, rural entrepreneurship, and things like that, right? So we work closely with the district administrations in those places. So there could be a young person who has an interesting idea, but he doesn't have the advantage which somebody living in a big city has, right? Access to markets, access to mentors, or access to capital, and so on. So that's one part. Then we also have another sister entity. We call it TASK, Telangana Academy of Skilling and Knowledge. So they work closely. They work in about 700 colleges, right? And part of what they do is also this piece around entrepreneurship and so on, right? So we work closely in conjunction with them, right? And then typically, similar to what I think Ali said, we do have lots of these community events where we so for example, see, entrepreneurship, a lot of entrepreneurship tends to be about aspirational. It tends to be aspirational, right? So you need to have, people need to feel that people like them, ordinary folks without any particular, advantages of birth or genetics or whatever, right? Can also go out there and become an entrepreneur, right? So they get inspired when they see people similar to their backgrounds, right? Go out there and become successful. So we try and do that a lot and get people to come in, talk to people, do something. Sometimes we call it, we have a lot of what we call these AMAs, ask me anything, right? So people ask you, why did you want to start a business, right? How did you go about it? How did you get your first customer? How did you get your first investor, right? How did you hire your first employee, and so on, right? And then they realize, listen, if this chap who comes from a background very similar to mine, has been able to do it, there's no reason why I can't. So it's the whole role model, storytelling,
Representation matters. I completely agree.
Yeah.
We try very hard to have a variety of representation, to your point, MSR, so that people see people who are like them and you think, I can do that too. We actually have what we call a pre-accelerator. So maybe you have an idea that's just past the back of a napkin stage, but you don't necessarily have much else going with it. And we run 2 cohorts a year of that with 8 to 10 people in each cohort. And it is specifically based on underrepresented founders. So people of color, women, and it is sponsored by Microsoft for Startups, Dell for Startups, Audi, and you get non-dilutive capital at the end of it to help you take that next step, as well as we give village memberships at a very large discount so that people can continue the community. And while they're in the cohort, they get a free membership with us to start building that connectivity and allow them access to our mentors and advisors and create that network. And it has, I think we're on cohort number 10 over the last 5 years, and it has made a huge impact in changing the demographic makeup of our ecosystem. And they want to give back then. And so they recommend great people for the next cohort, and it sort of becomes this really wonderful synergistic experience.